I am PLO Lumumba here at the Maruba Dam in Machakos County in the Republic of Kenya, here in the continent of Africa. We continue our pace to interrogate issues that relate to the history and even contemporary ones on the continent of Africa. And today we look at the British and how concentration comes in the continent of Africa. The British, as a colonizer, were present in the continent very early on, and her activities started in earnest even before the Berlin Conference. In the southern part of Africa, history will remind us of the Anglo-Boer Wars. And it is these Anglo-Boer Wars, and there was the first Anglo-Boer War, the second Anglo-Boer War, but we remember that it is out of these wars that what we describe as concentration camps were conceived by the British. Perhaps it is important to ask ourselves what concentration camps are. These were camps. These were designed and designated territories, most of which were then given a veneer of legality by the British Parliament or by the Home Secretary, designating them as places where malcontents would be kept under control and in a regimented area. And as war continued, these camps continued to be populated by individuals who are deemed to be resisting the British Empire. In Southern Africa, you had camps of this nature in places such as Natal, which is on the coast toward the Atlantic, toward the Indian Ocean. You had camps in the Cape. You had camps in the Orange Free State, what is now called the Orange Free State. They were concentrated in those areas, and it's always instructive that the British were very deliberate in the manner in which they chose the concentration camps. They were inhospitable areas, in areas where it was difficult to escape. The inhospitability was a factor in determining whether they would be used. They were designed in such a manner as to ensure that when you are interned in those areas, it would be very difficult to escape. And in the southern part of Africa, of course, they remained alive during the entire period of the Anglo-Boer War. And it is only after settlement that those who were interned in those areas were released. As if it was a trial, it is instructive that these concentration camps were always almost to be found. And my interpretation is subject to debate and subject to scrutiny. That the British were clear that there are certain territories which were meant to be settler territories. Settler territories to mean that the British who were resident in those areas never intended to leave, to go back to the mother country. And in areas such as Natal, if you go to the areas which was populated by the British, the intention was never to leave. They had farms there, they had translocated, and they were going to live there. And for that reason, anybody who resisted their presence was to be dealt with, and dealt with firmly and decisively. And the whole idea of the concentration camps was to dehumanize the people, was to demoralize the people, was to send a clear message to both the individual and the family that we were not going to tolerate anything in the way of rebellion at all. One can argue that what had happened in Southern Africa by the British by way of concentration camp was also being prepared for another settler society. Kenya, the Republic, what is now known as the Republic of Kenya, was also a settler community where the British who came, particularly those who lived in the White Highlands, which was peopled by the Agikuyu of Kenya, never intended to leave. And when the struggle for independence started in earnest, And when the resistance started in earnest, then the British resorted to one of the most extreme methods of ensuring that those who are involved in the struggle for independence was controlled. It was a land question, and the Agikuyu of Kenya, normally referred to by European historians as Kikuyu, were in the forefront of the resistance of what is called Mau Mau. Mau Mau, historians suggest that was actually the reverse use of the word Uma Uma, which means leave, leave. So they reversed it and it became known as the Mau Mau struggle. And when the Mau Mau started, the warriors were as committed as they were committed in other parts of the world. What the British then did from the year 1952 to 1960 that they separated particularly the men from their families and designated some of the most difficult areas to live in Kenya as concentration camps. Kamiti, Hola, Manyani, Lodwar, Mageta Island on what is known as Lake Victoria. In fact, whenever I think Mageta, because it's not too far from my rural home, I see it and I see these fellows who are ingenious. There was no way you could escape. Once you've been placed in that island, you are from Gikuyu land, which is nearly 600 kilometers away. Even if you escape, where are you going to? And I can see the same idea that informed the creation of Robben Island in South Africa is the very same idea that formed the idea of Mageta Island. And what they did during that period, of course, is that people were denied their human rights, and I'm talking about human rights in a very broad sense. They were denied their humanity, they were denied food, or if they got food, was only for the sake of survival. And this continued throughout the British Empire, and for a very long time, many of these concentration camps remained alive. So the philosophy behind the concentration camps was manifold, but let me characterize a few of the underlying philosophy. The underlying philosophy was you were creating an environment where the leaders of the resistance movement were away from those whom they were leading. And physically, they were away, and emotionally, they were also demoralized. The design was that those who remained in the territories would be demoralized, so that if you came to Kenya and you removed Dedan Kimathi wa Shiuri and took him away to Kamiti, then you are destroying the Mau Mau movement. And you are telling them, if we have taken your very best, what can you do? It was also designed to separate families. And once they had separated families in that manner, it was also dismembering the society. And thirdly, it was also a way of ensuring that they were depopulating the population. They were taking the male of the population, and very few of the female gender were taken into these concentration camps. Remember also that the British model was also to put people in what were described as native or colonial camps, and some of them still exist. You would be removed from some of the most arable, some of the most fertile land, and you would be taken into these concentration camps, and the white settler would then use you as labor. This was the underlying philosophy of the British concentration camp, and it was easier, therefore, it was also a control mechanism, because once you've put people in a confined environment, then it becomes very easy to control them. It becomes very easy to ensure that the activities are monitored. And it is during this period that this idea of recruiting Africans or those who are in concentration camps to spy on one another by dint of giving them incentives. And this is how you then ended up with the British indirect rule of recruiting a few individuals from the communities and making them what were described as colonial chiefs. These chiefs were then privileged. It is their children who would go to school. It is their children who would find themselves being sponsored to pursue further education, and it's their children who would ultimately, in quite a number of cases, such as in Kenya, their children became the first leading politicians, became the first leading civil servants, and the philosophy worked and worked to good effect, particularly ensuring that the British administration thrived without being involved on a daily basis. Remember that in the concentration camps, those who are guarding their fellows, whether they were African, they were fellow Africans. They had been recruited, they had been given privilege, and they had been told, if you control your own, then we are going to give you material things. The philosophy of the concentration camps, whether they were in South Africa, in Kenya, or whether those concentration camps were to be found in different parts of the world, in the different oceans, the philosophy was one: dislocate the leaders, separate the leaders, dismember society, depopulate society, leave the land available for occupation. And once you've done that, you've demoralized the population, you've indoctrinated the population, and you can dominate without any hindrance whatsoever. If there is a circumstances or a situation for which the word evil was created or the word diabolical was created, it was the British concentration camps. Evil to the hilt, diabolical to the hilt, the manifestation of man's inhumanity to man, the British concentration camp. Thank you very much. We are discussing Africa. We are discussing her painful history, and we are discussing it today as we focus on the British and the concentration camps that she opened and ran in the continent of Africa to good effect and to the detriment of the peoples of the land that they occupied. See you again as we continue with the conversations. Thank you very much.
The world is changing, and so is Africa's reality. Political shifts, new partnerships, and economic opportunities. And we're here to uncover why and how it's done. What do the billion-dollar IMF loans have to do with the Kenyan unrest? Are US and French troops actually withdrawing from African states after years of presence? Is Europe's so-called green agenda so green and helpful after all? Why are more and more African countries increasing trade with Russia? And how is Britain lending Africa the treasures London looted? Now, from colonial legacies and security to the future of African democracies, we break down the key challenges ahead and analyze the solutions. While the world is watching Africa, tune in with us and question more with RT International on Maisha TV Kenya.
Problem number one is leadership in Africa.
What can we do for Africa? That was a wrong question. The right question was, what can we do with Africa?
What Africa do we want?
Africa had to seek first the political kingdom, and the rest would be given unto them. Unfortunately, we sought and obtained the political kingdom, but there is still a debate as to whether the rest has been given unto us.
Half of our people here are below 20 years old. Yes? Look at the average age of our presidents. It's about 63, 64 years old. We're the only continent in the world where we have presidents at 90 years old, starting new terms. I mean, you guys are crazy or what?
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Mushabi Jr. on your screen, bringing to you a program called Maisha Talk. This is where we build your capacity to achieve your dreams and visions. One thing I've learned in life is nobody can ever tell you that you can never be anything or achieve anything in this world. Shut them down. You can achieve anything in this world. And in this program, that is what we are talking about. Principles, attitudes, belief systems, where you are going to gain a lot. You're better off than anybody who's not going to watch this program. This is going to change your life. It's big, it's fun, it's educating, it's entertaining. Right here on Maisha Television, where you choose it, you watch it, and you definitely love it.
This keeps me going on those days when I feel like giving up. Fire.
Do not want the money or properties achieved in a corrupt way.
Badala ya kusaidia watoto wadogo wadogo katika academy za sport, wewe kazi yako imekuwa kila weekend unakuja kwa matanga kutukana viongozi. Wewe ni waziri wa michezo ama waziri wa matanga na masuala za ndani.
Sasa wewe unatuambia nini? This government is going to punish you more than they will punish me.
Tuko na mheshimiwa Eugene, tuko na mheshimiwa Lusaka, na mheshimiwa Wetangula.
I have no problem. I have full confidence in the agencies that we have to do their job. People out there bandying my brother yesterday. Me, I've said, if he's guilty, aendelee.
Lakini hata nyinyi mkuwe na mshike rada. Sasa nyinyi wakati ya kufanya kazi mnasema tafuta Ruto, lakini siku ya kupiga kura mnaniambia tipping. Sasa nyinyi kweli mko na plani?
We invite you to like Maisha TV Kenya on all our online media platforms. Facebook at Maisha TV Kenya, Twitter at Maisha TV Kenya, Instagram at Maisha TV Kenya. Maisha TV now invites you to send your feedback or complain because we listen to you. You can now reach us on all our media platforms on Maisha TV. Just send your messages to our social media platforms, call or text us on 0746 999 841 or send us an email to info@maishatv.co.ke. We care. We shall respond to your feedback or complaints within 14 days. Also, keep a copy of messages sent to us. We listen to you. Because you listen and you watch us. Maisha TV. Choose it, watch it, and love it.
I am PLO LUMUMBA here at the Manzoni Wildlife Estate in Machakos County in the Republic of Kenya, here in the continent of Africa, continuing with the conversations regarding issues about the continent of Africa. And today we focus on an interesting individual, Muammar al-Gaddafi. Muammar al-Gaddafi became known to the world in the month of September 1969, when as a 27-year-old, he led the revolt against King Idris. And when he did so, the first thing that he struggled with was his identity. There are those who made the claim that he was not Arab enough, and therefore he made a lot of people very uncomfortable. But he came and made the claim that he was a pan-Arabist in the League of Gamal Abdel Nasser, and that he wanted to create a new Libya that was not beholden to the feudal system that had been in Libya for a long time, even after they had freed themselves from colonization. He led a military regime and tried to reform Libya, and ultimately in the 1970s, 1979 to be exact, he made Libya to be known as the Arab Libyan Jamahiriya, which is the socialist state that he created. His movement was quite clear in terms of his political orientation, that very quickly he moved to what can be defined in contemporary political terms as the left. He was seen to be a pan-Arabist, but much more of a pan-Africanist, because he looked to the south, and one can also say that he saw himself in the mold of Ernesto Che Guevara. And that is why, as he changed the Libyan flag and as he came about with his green book, which he said was going to govern how he reigned, to govern Libya, he said the people themselves must be involved in their governance. And during that period, accusations were made against Muammar al-Gaddafi that he was sponsoring terrorists. And indeed, he himself did say he was not sponsoring terrorists, but he was sponsoring freedom fighters. His hands in the Irish movement in Northern Ireland, the Moro in as far as the Philippines. He was in Sahrawi. He was sponsoring and supporting the African National Congress. He was supporting the Palestinian Liberation Organization. He was present in Chad. He was even present in places like Liberia, supporting individuals there. He became that revolutionary. And one of the most amazing things is how he leveraged on the oil. Because when oil was discovered and started being exploited in Libya in the quantities that we now know are there, he took the view that the oil should be for the benefit of the Libyan people. And as long as the Western companies were there, he told them this is going to be for the benefit of the Libyan peoples. And to his credit, what he did was then to say that we've got to refine our own oil. Oil Libya was born out of that. We are going to use this to subsidize education. We are going to subsidize health. We are going to create a social welfare state. We are going to get water from the aquifers in the south and bring them to the Libyan people, and efforts were made in that regard. But the Western world was not always comfortable with him. And that is why during the Reagan administration, they bombed Libya in 1986, and he lost very close relatives. And he then took the view from the Pan-African standpoint that the Organization of African Unity as it was being run was an organization that was not Pan-African enough. He revisited, and one needs only listen to his speeches, he revisited some of the key individuals who were in the Pan-African mold. He was inspired by Kwame Nkrumah, Modibo Keita of Mali, Mohammed V of Morocco, Gamal Abdel Nasser, Mohamed Sékou Touré, and he said that the OAU must be reformed. And it's therefore not lost on any keen historian that when the OAU was suffering from what I call a crisis of identity, and it was being described as a toothless bulldog, some said it was not even a dog, so therefore it could not have teeth. He said, we've got to reform the Organization of African Unity. And the conversations around the reform of the Organization of African Unity started in Libya during the 4th ordinary session of the Organization of African Unity in Sirte in Libya in the year 1999. And it is from Sirte that the AU then moved and graduated until it became the AU in Durban, South Africa in the year 2002. So Gaddafi said, we have to make sure that the continent of Africa, under the new body called the African Union, goes back to the original dream. The original dream, which was articulated in 1963. He went back to the argument that in order to be respected in the world, we needed one army. So he started talking about one army and eliminating all the bases that were particularly present in different parts of Africa by Western powers. He needed a unified command. He said, in addition to that, we needed to take charge of our resources. So where there was oil, we've got to produce and use our own oil for the benefit of the people. He said we've got to have one common foreign policy in order to be able to participate in the affairs of the world. And that demanded, among other things, that we've got to have one government that is drawn from the experiences of the peoples of Africa. And it's not lost on me that he invited at one time all the known traditional rulers of Africa, and they invited them to his home in Sirte, and they named Muammar al-Gaddafi the King of Kings. In that way, he was telling them that in order to appreciate and understand Africa, we've got to move into the direction of having systems of governance that were informed by our own realities. And Muammar al-Gaddafi did not stop there. Although he himself was accused to be a dictator, he said that the people must be involved in governance. So he gave meaning through his Green Book, which was published in the 1970s, the late 1970s. He gave pride of place to the people and said that the people must be involved and consulted at different levels. But there is one thing that he said which I think ruffled the Western world. When he said that the time had come to revisit the Bretton Woods institutions, he questioned, why should the IMF, why should the World Bank dictate how we conduct our affairs? Why should the dollar be the dominant currency on the basis of which we sell our goods and commodities? He therefore suggested that Africa must have one currency. He said, and he suggested that it should be called the African dinar. One can understand, I'm sure other names could have been suggested. And he said, the African dinar will be gold-based. It will be a currency that will be backed by the gold, and Africa produces a sizable amount of gold. And it is from that standpoint that Muammar al-Gaddafi started to experience the sanctions that we now know that Libya was subjected to. It is from that standpoint that the Western world started to be hostile to Muammar al-Gaddafi. He was accused of having been one of the major sponsors of individuals who are not considered to be very democratic. And in this regard, one of the individuals that was mentioned was Idi Amin of Uganda. And ultimately, of course, that was torpedoed because there were elements within the African Union who are now being primed to fight all these ideas that were being brought forth by Muammar al-Gaddafi. In a sense, therefore, it can be said that some of the ideas of Muammar al-Gaddafi are some of the ideas that later congealed into what we now see as Africa Agenda 2063 and Africa Continental Free Trade Area. But domestically, Muammar al-Gaddafi was beginning to have problems. He was beginning to have problems because the revenues that came from oil were not flowing as fast as was expected, or they were not flowing in the manner that was desirable and to sustain the programs that he had initiated, such as health, such as housing, such as social welfare. And it is to be noted that that was during the period of the Arab Spring. When the Arab Spring therefore started in earnest, initially in Tunisia and spread throughout the Arab world, then Muammar al-Gaddafi and his administration was not spared, because within his own administration, it can be argued, there were fifth columnists who argued that he was spending too much time on this African project. And it is true that he did finance quite a number of African countries, even by giving them money directly or giving them subsidies, while in the view of those others, the domestic situation in Libya was not as rosy as was being depicted to the world. So in the face of those contestations and in the face of the Arab Spring, the Gaddafi administration, which was also facing an onslaught from the West, became victimized and a civil war broke out. And this civil war, we now know that it was choreographed both internally and externally. And we know that Gaddafi was then accosted and ultimately arrested and murdered in the streets of Libya in a manner that we know was carefully choreographed by his enemies from the West, who were using individuals within his own country. And as a result of the death of Muammar al-Gaddafi, Libya descended into the chaos in which she now finds herself. Libya descended into the confusion in which she now finds herself, with two contesting governments. And it's not lost on me that one of the last surviving individuals in his own family, his son, was recently assassinated, and the Gaddafi lineage has been brought to an end. History will therefore remember Muammar al-Gaddafi in the following ways. They'll remember Muammar al-Gaddafi as the leader who freed the Libyans from the feudal administration of King Idris. They'll remember Muammar al-Gaddafi as the leader who confronted the Western world. They'll remember Muammar al-Gaddafi as the leader who gave pride to the Libyan people and used the resources of Libya for the benefit of Libyans. They'll remember Muammar al-Gaddafi as the leader who was in the forefront of the Pan-African clarion call for African unity. They'll remember Muammar al-Gaddafi as a revolutionary and a reformist leader who stood on the pedestal and said African resources must be used for the benefit of Africa. They remember Muammar al-Gaddafi as a leader who said a united Africa is an Africa which can stand in the face of the world. Like all leaders, he had his failings, but when the scales of history are applied, I believe that his positives will outweigh his negatives. Muammar al-Gaddafi. Thank you very much. We continue our conversation, and we have today focused on an interesting historical figure in the continent of Africa, Libya's Muammar al-Gaddafi. We will come back again as we continue with these conversations. Thank you very much, and keep following us.